Oh, man.
Big noise.
All right, so take me to the beginning, Coach, because I think you're a Tulsa native, right?
For sure.
Born and raised?
Yes, sir.
Good deal. So how was it being a young kid, young black boy in the city of Tulsa? You know what I mean? Dispel some of the negative narratives that we hear about that experience coming up.
Well, I can tell you this, the journey is situational, right? No matter where you're coming from, your perspective is based on the context in which you grew up in. And so for me, coming from, Jackson, Mississippi, where my parents were from, having moved all along the East Coast, we came to Tulsa rather, because my dad saw it as a way to get closer to Jackson, Mississippi. So here you have this young black boy that's from the Southern culture, that's used to that dynamic. And all of a sudden I found myself in Tulsa on the white side of town.
Yeah.
And so it was different for a variety of reasons. We started off at Jinx Elementary, Jinx East, because that's what they told my pops, that's the best school around here. Mm-hmm. So we started off in Jinx, man, and it was just one of those situations where I would be the only person that looked like me in not just one grade, but 2, 3, 4 grades, perhaps in my whole building,
Did it take long for you to pick up on that?
It did. I mean, it did not at all. I mean, because coming in at the age of 8 or 9, those are things that, my daughter is that age now, my middle daughter, and a lot of times she notices that. So you start to pick up on those things. But what was interesting was I over time not only became aware but became accustomed of that dynamic. However, what I wasn't accustomed to was that a lot of black folks saw me as, well, that's that black kid that lives on the white side. You know what I'm saying? So you getting it kind of both ways. You know what I'm saying? So you having to go and protect yourself, in the school setting, but also when you go and try to be around your people, and get some culture and get some what you used to, they're looking at you different. So it was an interesting dynamic, but it really taught me to be self-aware, and really taught me that proving myself and my self-worth was important. And so just like anything, man, it made me, just like any type of pain that you go to, it really go through, it really made me who I am.
How did you navigate through the misunderstandings that you just broke down? And more specifically, were you one that would just keep your head down and just do you, or were you an explainer? You try to explain yourself or your case, or did you have to knuckle up and scrap?
All of the above, you know what I'm saying? And so really for me, it was a lot of, like anybody in these situations, if you get through them, it's about your internal dialogue, right? And so I went through the struggles of that and that identity crisis and who am I? I know I'm from the South. I don't know nothing but black people. But at the same time, you're coming up in a staunchly white world where there's nobody that looks like you, on a day-to-day basis. However, when you go to church, when you go to hoop, when you go to social gatherings, all that looks like us. You know what I'm saying? And so that created an identity crisis for me, but it's also been my biggest gift because now I can operate in both worlds with a lot of clarity and a lot of identity, and no identity crisis. I know who I am, and I know that my access allows me to now advocate for people who look like me and now become somebody who can explain, what that experience is like to people who don't look like me. And so it's actually been a blessing being in the middle.
How vital were your parents in that situation? And I'm gonna tell you exactly where that question is coming from, because I think whether we want to admit it or not, I think most black folks, we get prepared for dealing and
Right.
moving in a world that doesn't necessarily belong to us.
Right.
You know what I mean? I know we sort of speak in a cryptic language, but I can remember when I was a young one, my daddy had told me, he's like, listen, he's like, son, it's important for you to know how to make white folks feel comfortable.
Right.
And that's not a lot of context in that.
Right.
But for some reason, I knew exactly what he was saying when he said it.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? Was there any type of teachings, whether it was right out in front of you or beneath the surface by your parents?
Man, my dad is old school. So, and sometimes I have to, because I think our job is to evolve from our parents, you know,
Yes.
take it at least one step further. But as you mentioned, take their experiences, take their learnings, take their education, and meld it together, and then take it a step further for the next generation.
Sure.
And so my dad was very much, boy, just get through it, like make it happen. You know what I'm saying?
No
And so,
excuses.
yeah, no excuses. You're going to have to get out there and put up or shut up. But at the same time, he himself, he's a lawyer, so there's this legal side of him where he kind of battled from the legalistic front, and there were lots of situations where he saw there was lack of equity as far as what people of color had access to, albeit jobs, opportunities, you know, access to different sports or access to different trainings, and he fought it from that perspective. So he was often in the principal's office or in the administrator's office on my behalf and on behalf of other minorities, but that wasn't made known to me. The messaging to me was, hey, you go out there and do your thing and do what you know the standard is. So,
But he had your back.
he had my back
On the
though,
low.
so that was very good, man. And he actually was instrumental in getting a lot of people who have since come through Jinx and other suburban schools to some of their first opportunities. Antoine Jemison, he got him his first job at Jinx. You know, even some of the guys up at the University of Tulsa that you see up there coaching basketball, he was instrumental at getting them that opportunity. And so that's always kind of been his MO, and it's been a mantle I've taken up and I realize the importance of.
Beautiful thing, man. And so we actually got a few similarities right there. I think we both come from two-parent households who did it the quote-unquote right way.
Right.
Both our fathers are attorneys. I don't know if you knew that part.
Yeah, I knew that. I've chopped it up with your dad a couple times.
Yeah, man, good dude. But do you have any siblings? This is a question I've never known the answer to.
Yes, sir. So I got a sister. She went to Memorial. I graduated in 2000. I believe she graduated in 2003. She was a hooper, but tore her knee up and got in a car wreck in high school, so didn't hoop at the college level, but was instrumental at getting that Memorial Girls program off the ground in the early 2000s. And then my little brother was actually graduated from Booker T. Washington.
Juwan.
Yeah, here at 2013, and Oklahoma Player of the Year, two-time state champion. Went to the University of Georgia and had a great career there.
I knew about Juwan. I was just being facetious. But I didn't know about your sister, though.
Yeah, for sure.
So basketball, it ain't even on you. It's in you.
Yeah, it's. I told my kids the other day, listen, this is the family business. You know what I'm saying? To the point where we're sitting in a gym. This is how real we take it. And what I mean by that is, you look back in the olden times, apprenticeship, anytime, you can go back to biblical times. Every father was responsible for giving his son and his children the family business, as far as whatever that trade was, whether it was, you know, being you're fashioning swords, or you're a farmer, or whatever, you were responsible for teaching them something. And so this is what I have to teach them. This is what I was taught. Now, there are a lot of other lessons inside of that. There's obviously the character, the work ethic, the commitment, everything else that comes along with, you know, the hard work that it takes to build yourself into a player. Yeah. There's the educational piece, because you can't get on this court if the grades aren't right. And so, as I mentioned earlier, that really speaks to me, where I'm not just a proponent of education and athletics. I'm actually a product of it, because I get, hey, the reason I'm here is to hoop, but I know I've got to do other things that align with that. And so a lot of times when people, and I was just at the OSSAA on a committee earlier this week, and we were talking about the Rule 9, like you can't go for athletic purposes. And I'm like, why is that? Because for a lot of people that look like us, athletics is the education, right? And if the athletics is right, I'm gonna get everything else taken care of.
The biggest incentive there is.
That's the incentive. And so there's nothing wrong. I don't care. I tell kids all the time, that's one of the reasons I'm an athletic director. I don't care what your incentive is. If it's band, if it's basketball, if it's tiddlywinks. As long as you want to be here, now I got an opportunity to educate you. Right. But if you don't care anything about being here, I lose you, right? And so as educators, I think we have to see ourselves more so as marketers. Like, what do I have that's going to attract the attention and engagement of a young person? Once I have that, then the sky's the limit. And that was the way my parents approached it.
Hello, we're finished tropical smoothie. Order whenever you're ready.
That's a great breakdown of the sport, man. Because I think, especially people who either haven't been in athletics at a high level, or even some who have, they sort of marginalize the experience of it.
Absolutely.
It's not just basketball; it's all encompassing.
Right.
You know, from a character standpoint, you learn how to battle, you learn how to bond, you learn how to deal with people who may not be your favorites on a day-to-day basis,
right.
And you learn how to fail,
right.
how to pick yourself up, give your best effort, and still fall short.
Right.
Because all those things happen in life, and then eventually you have that breakthrough. I just love team sports in general, but obviously I'm partial to basketball. Okay.
No, and it's anything, man.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is. And I told my coaches this today. We had a meeting, and it's like at the very least, every single student that comes through your program should get discipline. Mm-hmm. They should get the discipline of showing up every day, showing up on time, doing what's right, executing what you're asking them to execute, whether it's a play or cleaning up a locker room. They're going to get a baseline of discipline that's going to carry them through life. The other thing they're going to get is determination. They're going to learn how to work with effort, work hard to bring rigor to what they do, right? And then on the third thing they're going to get is development, meaning they're going to see growth. I started here, I was lifting 10 pounds, I'm lifting 20. I started not being able to focus for an hour, now I can focus for 2 hours. I couldn't make, 10 shots, now I can make 10, and so those three things, if you can take those three things into any area of life, man, you're going to win, and so I think it's a great module for kids to be involved in because the whole world's inside of it.
Lovely. Very well put, man. But before we leave the adolescent chapter, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about your mother. Okay, so Dr. Parker is what I refer to her as. And it took a while for me to connect the dots, but she was my counselor my junior and senior year in high school.
That's right.
So we're talking 2006 and 2007. And this is at Tulsa Central High School. And then fast forward 2020, when I get the head boys job and I'm back home now, she's one of the first faces I see when I go back in the building. I'm like, wow, you know what I mean? And then her last year was last school year, right? She just retired in 2021.
Just retired last year.
2022. Okay. But talk about her impact in y'all's relationship.
Man, Mom's is a behind-the-scenes legend.
Okay.
I got inducted. I was blessed to get inducted to the Tulsa Public Schools Hall of Fame 2 years ago, and I was inducted with Abby Erie, and who grew up with us. For sure. And first person he thanks is my mom. Because at that time she was in McLean, and he's like, man, Dr. Parker, you got me through. And I didn't even know this. It's kind of like what you say.
Yeah.
And so many people come. Man, we were at church, Transformation Church, and I had been going to Transformations for like 2 years. And I'm like, Mom, you need to come. So she walks in, and Mike Todd literally stops what he's doing in the middle of a sermon, and it's like, this woman saved my life, and I'm like, ooh. And so Moms is an underground legend, man. She's just been doing her thing. Pops is big and boisterous and 6'4" and gonna tell you about yourself and make you feel good or feel bad, depending on which way you want it. But Moms is just behind the scenes, man. But she's always been there. She's always been that presence. And my parents are both educators. My dad did it and still does it at the college level as a law professor. My mom has always been a counselor at the high school level. And so, like I said earlier, we're a mixture of those two inputs. Her influence has really led me to go to the high school rather than the collegiate level, just because I saw what she was able to do, not only for impact other kids, but be there for us as a family as well. So she's a huge, huge influence. I thank God every day for her.
Family for the educators and the kid business, man. All right, so now we got to talk hoops. First of all, when did you start playing organized basketball? Two-part question. And then the second part is, when did you start getting good? I was a late bloomer, so I'm always fascinated by this one.
Yeah, no, man. I was born with the ball in my hand. Okay. Pops was young. He skipped. He was the number one player in high school in the state of Mississippi as a sophomore. Junior year, gets kicked out of school, drops out, has the worst year of his life, just doing thuggish, ruggish things, and gets his GED, and then goes to college, graduates college and law school in like a matter of 4 years. Like, he just got his mind set on something. Yeah, it was an incredible turnaround story. So long story short, when he had me during this process, I had to be on it like him. So I'm waking up, doing drills at the age of 3 and just all this, what I'm saying? So he ain't never played about me, So I was pretty, I've always been like one of the more skilled kids, but I really didn't put it all together until 8th grade. I went to Jinx, as I mentioned, and we came from the East Coast. So when we got to Jinx in 4th grade, I was actually younger, because you start school at age 5. So I was younger. So I was able to sustain off skills 4th, 5th, 6th. Once I got to 7th and 8th, I was a smaller kid, you know what I'm saying? And so, compared to the kids that were a year older than me. Yeah. And so I was one of the better players technically, but as far as effectiveness, if you were big and strong, you were probably just as good as me. And so my dad got into it with the coach, man. We went and it's funny saying this from the side I'm on now. Right. But he got into it with the coach. I had actually showed up late to a game, and I was normally a starter, but the kid I was with was a starter. And he played the whole game. Once we got there, we showed up like a couple minutes late. And I never played. And so that was the straw that broke the camel's back. We transferred to Tulsa Memorial Middle School, which was Bird at the time. And my dad put me back in my right grade. So at that point, I was feeling myself. I'm in 7th grade and actually around cats that's my size. Yeah. And so just from there, man, I never forget that next year. I just really started to see myself as a player, and then the rest was history.
Okay, so when he put you back in your right grade, did you feel a way about that?
I don't remember, man. Okay. I really don't remember, because, when we look back, I just remember the outcome. But if I had to guess, I would say I really liked it because...
He told you why?
No, so I told you, Pops don't explain. He's just
right,
like, we doing this. You know what I'm saying?
I guess the reason I asked you that is the worst fear, 2 worst fears to me when I was that age that you're talking about was A, having to do summer school, and B, having to repeat the grade. And so I'm like, oh, no, absolutely not. So, but I guess
I didn't care about that, man. And truth be told, it was about the age where you start smelling yourself and looking at the ladies. Yeah. And my colleagues, my classmates had more confidence in game than me, and
like me.
I was one of those dudes that was kind of shy because of it, and because I hadn't really developed and come into my own. So when I got to go back, I just remember like it's on. It's like on. I know more than y'all. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it was a good thing, man.
I love it. And I know what that looks like. Even if it's not vocalized, it's just something about that. You just got an extra little dip on your chip, you know what I'm saying? A little pep in your step. So would you say you were always a coachable kid, though?
No, definitely, man. Like I said, Pops didn't play, so I'm always somebody who really got in line with what the coach was asking. I do remember, though, back in those times, the major AAU team around here was, you remember? It might have been different when you came up.
It might have been, but the first one that comes to my head on as far as the East Side is concerned. Are you talking about the Ballers, or is it is it the Jammers? Was it the Jammers?
No, it was the Tulsa Hawks.
The Hawks.
So we had the Hawks back with Dr. Bryant, and I mean we had everybody coming through there, and so I got a chance to be on the Hawks as a sophomore. Actually, me and Dante Swanson was in the same backcourt. And had some hoopers. Kalina has a Buki, Ricky Bruner, a couple of cats was on that team. And
he mentioned a chapter about that. The only year he played, he was with y'all.
Yeah. So
on the back of the bench and ended up getting in the mix.
That's right. So and so I actually went to that tryout, man, and got into it with the coach. And that was the first time I'd ever but I felt like he was kind of trying to change my game, and I had never been through that before because, like I said, since the time I was a seventh grader and transferred to Tulsa Memorial, like they pretty much just blessed me.
Yeah.
So when I got in that situation, it just didn't feel right, and I'm like, no, I'm not having this. And so I walked off the court. I'll never forget we're scrimmaging the Tulsa Rebels, which was the other big team at the time, Ebby Erie, Antonio Reed, Junior Blunt. And I just walk out, and I'm like, man, I'm done with this.
You didn't get mouthy, you just bounced.
No, I kind of got mouthy to him. I said a couple choice.
At least you keep it real.
Said a couple of choice words. I do remember that.
Were your parents there at all, or was it just you?
They weren't. But I don't know where they were. But my pops told me, I told you you wouldn't like that AAU situation there because I hadn't played AAU like that before. I was a guy that traveled around the nation to Nike camp and 5-star camp and stuff like that. So that was one time I kind of got out of pocket, but it ended up working in my favor. They brought me back the next year with a new coach, and the situation was love. So
man, I told you weren't gonna like that. So like, how do you think about that now? Do you feel the same way about it now as you did back then? Like, yeah, that was the right move, or it worked itself out, or was it like?
Well, it's similar to the situation to leave Jinx, and to go to another place, and it goes back to our conversation with the Rule 9 and OSSAA. You got one opportunity. You got 4 years, and if you're engaged, I don't care what it is, that we would never look down on a kid who was, a scientist and wanted to go to a school that had a great chemistry lab. We would never look down on a kid that was a musical genius that wanted to go to Juilliard, or an actor, blah, blah, blah. But all of a sudden, when it's sports, it's a problem.
Yeah.
And you can't help but notice that mostly affects people of this melanin.
That's right.
So why, when I decide that, basketball, football, softball, whatever it may be, is really important to me, where I want to go somewhere to get my shot. And what you hear a lot of coaches say is, well, this is pure. We're trying to keep the game pure, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're trying to keep the game pure for you as a coach. So you don't have to get out and do all that hustle and bustle and sit down in people's houses and figure out what kid is going where on Instagram and blah. You don't want that smoke. Yeah. So you want them to come to you and stay with you so you can manipulate the situation and best monopolize the situation. However, right, it's only one basketball out there. It's only one point guard usually, one quarterback, one pitcher. So if I'm not in that pecking order, it makes sense to leave. It makes sense to find the best opportunity. And so I never look down on that, because that's what we as adults do. If I'm in a situation where I don't feel like I can move on to the next level at a given organization, I'm going to move to the next organization when the time is right. And so we punish the kids that are most awakened to the reality of what they want to become. Whereas a lot of kids are just, right, I'm just here because this is a school that's across the street and blah, blah, blah. And we take advantage of that, right? And I don't want to say completely take advantage, because a lot of times we give those kids opportunities is the game plan. But a lot of times, if not for the kids being aware of, man, I could really go there and change my life. I tell people all the time, had I went to Jinx, we wouldn't be doing this interview right now. You know what I'm saying? I would have just been another guy. But because I went to somewhere where I was valued and somewhere where their commitment level matched my commitment level,
There was room for you to grow.
it was room for me to grow. So, it is what it is.
And the other realistic component is, listen, most folks think college when high school is done.
Right.
Even though, I've since evolved in my own thinking to realize that, okay, there are more ways to make a successful life for yourself even if you don't go to college.
Absolutely.
But the common mind is thinking after high school, college. Well, you got to have some means in order to make that happen.
Right.
So the type of kids we're talking about, usually the ticket from a financial standpoint is going to be
Absolutely.
whatever sport they're playing.
And that's why it's even more crucial and critical you get in the right perspective and situation. And I hear people all the time say, if we don't stop it, it's going to be like college. Well, what's wrong with college? Kids are being paid. They're going to places where they're going to thrive. They're valued rather than put on a shelf and, hey, we'll keep him for 3 or 4 years and then we'll see if we can do something for him. These coaches are actually having to re-recruit kids on a year-to-year basis. And the ball's in their court, so the dynamic has shifted. The power dynamic has shifted from the person, the coach, to the person of the kid, and we have a problem with that. But what I tell my coaches all the time is, if not for those kids, none of us are here. So they're our priority. You're not the priority. I'm not the priority.
Right.
And so we have a problem with that shift in dynamic, especially, like I said, when a lot of those people in that power position would be young black boys and girls,
True. And we're quick to tell those athletes, hey, listen, there's no such thing as a 4-year scholarship. You got to earn it every year. It's year to year.
Yeah.
So we got to earn their commitment.
Now we got to earn their commitment. So it goes both ways. So the field's been leveled. And if you look back down through the annals of time, especially, you can just look at professional sports. Anytime there's been, when Kurt Flood broke the free agency, when different people got different rights through going through the Supreme Court and breaking different antitrust laws and that were meant to keep people, in one given scenario. Now we got, Lamar Jackson turning down $250 million as a result of the sacrifices that these guys have made.
Right.
And so people don't always like when the people who are in power want to stay in power, right? And whether that's a billionaire or whether that's a high school coach. And so I ask every coach to just analyze that situation and see, are your feelings really more so about you and your comfort level, or more so about giving the kids access to what they actually want to have access to?
Here's the one thing that I think makes it tricky, is the word that you used a while ago, time. Just how much time does it make sense to put in order for you to give yourself a chance to have that breakthrough? Because see, from a purist standpoint, I didn't jump off the porch that early in terms of being good at basketball. I'd say around about 8th going into high school, that's when I started to blossom as a player and realized, okay, I'm pretty good at this.
Right.
And so I understood the value of planting my feet and actually working. I knew it was going to be a little bit of a slow grind for me.
Right.
And I have a different level of appreciation for the coaches that I had at that time, because they didn't just do away with me. They hung in there through those 3 or 4 years when I was thinking of the joint, a project. And then I eventually turned into something.
Right.
And so I think that kind of thing still could happen.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right?
Without a doubt. I mean, Chris Rock has a famous line. He says, a man is as faithful as his options.
Oh, yeah.
And so you were faithful because
Right.
you didn't have very many options. You
True.
know what I'm saying? And so what a lot of people, even in the fear when all this NIL and the ability, freedom of movement at the college level came about, people say it's going to be crazy. We're going to go. It's really just the top 5-10% of people, of players that have these options where they're highly sought after.
Right.
You're absolutely right. For the majority of kids, the place to be is right where they are. But when you are upwardly mobile, the ones that have figured it out, the ones that have put in the time, and the ones who are coming to the high school level in order to capitalize, or the college level, in order to capitalize on their hard work, their effort, and everything else, they shouldn't be held back because of a situation. If you're good enough, and that's just the capitalistic way, if you're good enough, you can go find yourself a job. And so we shouldn't hold back these kids from doing the same thing, because between my undergraduate degree at the University of Tulsa, I actually have two undergrad degrees, and I have a law degree from the University of Tulsa. That's over $300,000 in education. That's changed my life. You know what I'm saying? As a result of getting that opportunity. I got a head start in life because of that. I got access to different opportunities that if I was just a student, I may have not had access to. And so if you're telling me I shouldn't have, or any kid should not have that opportunity simply because they came up at the wrong time and, you know, there was a really good team that year and you can't go anywhere. That's anti-American to me.
You bottom lined it in a real way, man. Ain't nowhere else I can go from there. So let's take it back to Memorial, your high school chapter. You're there. Okay, did you play for O'Rourke or Sprague or both?
I played for both of them, man.
Okay.
I played for both of them. I started off with O'Rourke, and he left my freshman year, and in the middle of my freshman year, actually, and Coach Sprague took over, man, and he was kind of like, I liken him to, you know, Memorial had a real good recruiting system. And that's another thing where I say recruiting is a taboo word, but really as a coach, if you're not recruiting kids, you're not doing your job. And if we take the stigma away from recruiting, what is recruiting? Attracting.
That's right.
If you're not doing what it takes to attract kids, you're not doing your job. Now, in the form of overt recruiting, like, hey, I need you to come to my school. Okay, I get that. That we don't need that. But as far as, hey, I'm gonna put my school in the best light. I'm gonna have the gym open. I'm gonna be working out. I'm gonna do the best behind kids. That's recruitment. Right. So Memorial had a great recruitment system, and I saw that, and I was attracted to that because I could see that they valued what I valued at a very high level. And I don't care if it's you know, a spouse or a partner or a friend, like whenever you're attracted to similar things and are operating on a similar wavelength, it's going to be a pretty good relationship. Right. And so the person that had attracted me the most was Coach Sprague, because he was the assistant and he was the guy that kind of did those things, ran the camps, you know, did the open gyms, took the kids to the off-season workouts and summer leagues and things of that nature. We used to travel to Kentucky, Georgia every year for a summer league there, and so that was my guy, you know. So when he took over, like the very first thing he did was he moved me up to varsity.
Oh, you weren't on varsity?
No, I wasn't on varsity, and I think Coach O'Rourke really liked my game, but I think he was of the mindset like, you're going to earn it, blah, 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 and Coach Sprague was just like, you're my guy, you know. And so I came in, and I wasn't getting to play, but I got to practice every day against top talent, and that was the team that ended up, you know, losing in the state final, the Broken Arrow. So going through that scenario and situation is what made me and hardened me, so that next year when all those guys left as a sophomore, I mean, I hit the ground running, averaging 18, you know, versus had I been somebody that just got a freshman JV experience, probably would have just, you know, been a lot more hesitant coming into the varsity level.
Were there any nerves at all? And as a sophomore, because technically in terms of experience, you're really a freshman. Yeah. Aside from whatever your talents and your skills may be, and you know, sometimes when that popcorn starts popping, man, especially in that old Memorial Gym, man, when the conference was at its, when you could get beat by anybody, anywhere, any night.
Oh my God! I tell people all the time, man, there wasn't a team in the Green Country that didn't have at least one D1 cat that could give it to you all day long, and then 2 or 3 D2 cats, then 4 or 5 JUCO cats. I mean, it was murderer's row, man. And so for me, the nervousness was definitely there, but it's always there. I think my problem is if it's not there, I'd be worried, you know. So that's what drove me. That's what, you know, still to this day, you get that antsiness, you know, it's something there for you. And so that excited me. And then once you get in the rhythm of the game, you just let the skills take over and the competitiveness, and it was just fun.
Who were some of your elders at that time? Because even though you're not a freshman anymore, you're still a young boy.
Yeah, man. We had Vernon Durant, Atif Williams, Wes Pitcock, all those guys had graduated. So when I came in as a sophomore, we had Jake Thompson. We had a guy named Mike Rainey. We had some cats, man. We were actually ranked #1 in the state for like most of the year,
Yeah.
and ended up getting knocked by a good Sepulpa team with the
Bruno.
aforementioned Ricky Bruno. I'll never forget.
Was that to go to state?
That was to go to state, man.
Oh.
We messed around and lost in our 2 years in a row. We lost in our regional in the championship. So we ended up having to work our way back to the area, winning in the consolation, and then losing in the finals my sophomore year to Sepulpa, my junior year to Jinx. And so both really big upsets.
Damn Jinx, man.
Man, came back to bite me. So, no, it was tough, but it was good times.
Okay, so you chronicled a little bit your sophomore and your junior season. What about that senior one? You know, from an individual standpoint, we all want to go out with a bang. I think we all use that expression.
For sure.
Whatever the bang means.
Yeah.
You know, how was yours on the way out?
Well, it was awesome, man. By this time, you know, I had been through my process. I had, you know, had Kansas State, Notre Dame, Southwest Missouri, Syracuse, Arkansas, and TU were probably my final 6 I took visits to. And I had decided upon TU with my dad being there, Bill Self, you know, and that crew. And so at that point, I went into my senior year, you know, breathing free and just like, yeah, it's time to go and get to that state and try to win a chip, which we felt like we had the team to do it for the last 3 years. And obviously, even my freshman year, having lost in the finals. And so we just hit the ground running, man. I think we may have only lost 1 game that year in the regular season and ended up making it to state. And in the area final, I guess I was so hype about the breakthrough, I actually stood up on a table at Skiatook. We beat Tahlequah and Luke Dobbins, who was a big rivalry for us, and stood up on the table, man, and I'm like giving it to their fans.
He thought he was Kobe. You know what I'm saying?
And my homeboy gets up there and moons him. I'm like,
Oh, no. Well, we can't go that
that's too far, bro.
far. You can't go that far. Put your cheeks up.
Too far. So I got caught. But you know us, man. We us,
gonna
bro.
cut up. We are, man. And you gotta love us too. But it's like, hey, man, you can't.
He just took it too far, you know. And that was the fun thing, man, about Memorial, because you just had that element. You know, you had the Jinx side and the Midtown, but you had them bros there too.
Yeah.
And if you forgot about that at any moment, it would go left, you know. And so
You could be reminded.
you could be reminded real quick. So we ended up getting suspended for the first round. He was just kicked off. Matter of fact, I hadn't seen that brother since. So I don't know where he went, but God bless you, Slim, man. Holla at your boy if you hear me. But man, he was our big man too, and so he ended up getting kicked off the team, bro. I was suspended first half, and man, I came out second half like Superman.
Yeah.
Took my cape off. We ended up beating Putnam City North, I think, by like 20.
This is in the quarters?
This is in the quarters of state. Yeah, I think I had like 24 and a half. And we end up going and playing Norman the next round, and had our eyes set on Midwest City with Big Sheldon Williams, and Alexander. Ended up getting knocked second round, man. But they were a solid team. They might have beat us any way it goes, especially without our big. But it was a close game, and they ended up getting us.
You know, y'all were 6A at that time, correct?
Yeah. Well, we were going back and forth, but yeah, we were 6A. Yeah, we were all the TPS schools. Booker T, Central, Memorial, Edison were all kind of on that 5A, 6A cusp. So we would get some extra students 1 year and get bumped up and then go back down a couple years later.
And depending on what year that happens, that could work for you or against you.
Oh, man, my brother at Booker T, man, his first 2 years, they were 5A, struggled to even go 500, end up going on runs and winning state in 5A just because – whenever you turn it on, you know, if you got them cats, you can go win it.
Yeah.
Whereas they got bumped up to 6A his junior and senior year, and they had squads. He was obviously a player, and they didn't make it to state either year. You know, got beat in the area finals, and so that 6A is a gauntlet, man. Just with the number of kids these schools have, that the competition is at the highest levels, and so it's a tough haul, you know.
Somebody good don't go every year.
Yep. No, you're right. We had a tough one last year. You know, we felt like we should have been in there, and man, we kind of dropped the ball. I felt like we should have beat Forgot forget who it was, Son and Faye.
Yeah, I'm saying.
But you know, they came ready to play and got us.
Yeah, man, and just watching the route leading up to that area.
Yeah.
But listen, man, you know how much it means to a lot of folks in Muskogee to beat Jinx and or Union,
and then beat
y'all
them back
both
to back.
in the same region, back to back.
You couldn't tell us nothing, bro.
That's big, man. That's big time.
We was ready. So,
You know? But to your point a moment ago, when you mentioned, let me see if I can remember your TU commitment. Okay, was it intentional to have that chapter signed, sealed, and delivered going in before your senior season started, or did it just go that way?
I think it was probably a little bit of both. I mean, I think any kid that if you've got multiple offers and got some good situations on the table, like my dad always said, you can only choose one, so why not choose it? For me, it was intentional because at that time, Billy Self's name was getting real hot. And so, you know, I never forget reading articles where, like, he was the next it guy to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So I tried to hedge my bets by committing, but also not signing, so I would have the opportunity to pull back. And usually the time when coaches move was obviously during the Final Four. So got through that area, that time period, and he hadn't signed anywhere yet. He was still at TU, so I went ahead and inked in April. And then Lon Kruger ends up jumping to the Bulls in the middle of the summer, and he gets the Illinois job. And so I don't think anybody saw that coming. They weren't even on his list, you know, because he was looking at area schools like Kansas, OSU, OU, Arkansas. So that was surprising, and, you know, that kind of threw me for a loop.
How was it going to school right here, basically in the city where you've been up to that point? You know, 'cause, you know, a lot of kids, they say, man, I don't want to go too far from home, or they want to go as far away from home as they possibly can.
Yeah, man. For me, I was watching a Magic Johnson documentary, and he said, and this was at the end of my junior year, and I had been on all these visits. I was actually telling people, like, I don't want to go on even more visits. You know, you just get drained with the process. On the phone with coaches late at night, and all the mail, blah blah blah, which is really exciting when it starts, but towards the end, when it's like, what you gonna do? You know, it's like, I don't know. And so, because they all look the same. And Magic said, man, when I was going through my process, I realized that I had a school that was just like all the other schools right here in my backyard. And so I was like, man, that makes a lot of sense. Plus that with my pops being there, and I knew he was key element to my development. And I mean, it was crazy because me and Pops would work out so much that my teammates started coming to him. And the coaches felt a type of way about it. They was like, hey, man, you can't be training the whole team, Mr. Parker. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's our job. So we had to cool it on that. But I knew he was instrumental to me getting to where I wanted to be. So I decided to come home, or stay home, rather. And I didn't realize at the time, AD, but that was huge, man, for me, just because I see a lot of young kids now that make that jump to you know, wherever it may be, to other states, to big name schools. And it's tough because you're dealing with a coach that has got to be able to recruit where he's at. But if you're telling me as a recruit in that area, you've let a litany of kids come from other areas and kind of make a name for themselves, it's harder to recruit in that area. And so I just challenge people to think about, you know, who are the last Tulsa, Oklahoma guys who have really gone outside of the state and really been able to make an impact. And there are a few, but I guarantee you a lot of those situations would be even more so if they were at a home school right here in Oklahoma. So the fact that I could go to Tulsa was really big for me. The city super embraced me, man. I think from 98, when my second year at Memorial as a starter, to 2004, I don't think anybody was on the front page of the paper more than me, man. Just hard. My mama got all the clippings, man. But, I mean, the city just super embraced me, man. And, you know, relationships, opportunities have stemmed from that. And so I'm just appreciative.
How was your freshman season?
Man, it was tough. It was super tough, which it should be. But when you're going through it at the time, you don't know that. And so TU was in the midst of, obviously we had just lost Bill Self, and so Buzz Peterson came in. He wasn't a Tulsa guy. He wasn't familiar with, any of our success. It was just a stepping stone for him. And he wasn't, and I love Buzz, we still talk to this day, but he just wasn't the appropriate fit for the time and place. We were coming off an Elite Eight, winning the NIT, or we won the NIT his first year, my freshman year. But 3 straight years of deep runs in the NCAA tournament. Matter of fact, at that time, Tulsa was 3rd in the nation behind Duke and Cincinnati in number of years over a 3-year period. And so perennially ranked in the top 25. It was just some good ball here. And Buzz comes, and he's really not a communicator, so it was hard for me as a freshman to kind of learn what he wanted. With that being said, he played me every game. I was 6-7 man. Played 12 to 14 minutes a game and had a solid freshman year. Man. Yeah. So I just never forget, we go on this NIT run, and the NIT, man, if you've never been in it, it's long. It's long. Like, by the end of the NIT, Cats is trying to lose so they can get some spring break in. Let's end this, bro. Like, it's nobody watching it. Everybody focus on the tournament. We won our couple games.
Y'all want to watch the tournament too, man.
Exactly. We try to get home after our game to go watch the real game. So we was trying to get rid of it, man, and we kept winning. We ended up going to Madison Square Garden. So we ended up winning like 6 games. We won the championship. It was so bad, AD. We beat Memphis in the championship, I think, by 40. Like, whoa. They just did not want to be there. Nobody cared. Madison Square Garden halfway empty, you know. But during that whole run, man, I scored 0 points. 0 points, like for the whole playoffs.
Impossible.
Were
you still playing the same amount of minutes?
Still playing, still getting run. I had just froze up. I hit a wall, I think, mentally, but also the dynamic between trying to be a freshman point guard and take all that responsibility in the game had just got me froze. Obviously, for the coaches, anytime you get to the postseason, it's a big deal for their career and also for the health of the program. And so I think the pressure got to me a little bit. But similar to the situation in high school where that freshman experience really molded me, it gave me the opportunity that I came out sophomore year ready to go. You know what I'm saying? And so I wasn't taking anything for granted.
Well, it sounds like since your minutes didn't fluctuate at all, you still remain to be productive in some other ways.
I don't know. Maybe bringing the ball up.
There you go.
I'm sure I was defending and all that stuff, but it's about that that engagement piece. Whatever it is, bro. And for me, it was putting that ball in the basket. Yeah. And if I wasn't doing that, I wasn't doing nothing. So you're right. I was probably doing enough to stay on the court, but that just stuck with me, not being able to score the ball.
Okay, so before we go to your sophomore year, I think that freshman year is definitely tough. I went to JUCO route, and so it wasn't obviously I wasn't playing at an elite level comparatively speaking, but I know about that wall. I know about that grind, and it can get frustrating. Yeah. But I know I leaned a lot on my dad.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
For sure.
How did you and your dad's relationship ever evolve as you got older?
No, for sure. No, to this day, I mean, that's my best friend, my confidant. You know, we have a lot of deep conversations, and so that's what it became. And it was funny because it was the first time in my life where I looked at my dad and he didn't have the answers. And it was funny because I talked to parents about this now. I had a parent meeting yesterday with a lady who was in that boat. She didn't know what to tell her kids. She was falling out of love with the sport. She's confused about the coaches and the dynamic, and I was just able to walk her through the kind of the life cycle of sports, and that you go through these periods where it's tough. You go through these periods where you seem like everything you do is wrong and you don't make the right reads. And that's really an important part of the process. And a lot of times, because it's so painful, we unplug and just say, oh, I don't like that. But if you're willing to go through it, there's a key on that other side that's going to open doors for you, for the end of time. And so it was important for me to go through that. And, like I said, the rest is history.
You talked about how you rolled into your sophomore season, with a battery in your back and a chip on both shoulders.
Hungry, bro. Yeah. I tell people all the time, when I stepped on that court that summer, my attitude was I'm here, and I'm letting everybody know. And
yeah.
so at that point, I was a force in my own mind, and obviously it takes some time to manifest that. But that was a big year for me, scored in double figures, still coming off the bench, but was a solid 6-man for a really, really good team. We ended up going to beating D. Wade and Marquette in the first round. I never forget, I had 11 big points in that upset, so I was happy about that. We played Tayshaun Prince the second round. I had 12, and Tayshaun had 40, unfortunately. So we ended up losing by 4, so it was tough.
Tough, man.
But it was a good year.
About 4, that's respectable, though.
No, we was actually up a lot of the game, man. Our guard play was just incredible at that time. I mean, you had Greg Harrington, which I still think was the best guard I've ever played with. Dante Swanson, who is probably the most athletic, just uncanny player I've ever seen. I mean, you could put Dante in the post at 5'10".
You still can't.
Right.
Or
tell him to bring the ball up or lead the nation in threes. And so he was just the ultimate utility knife. Then you had Antonio Reed, who was just a game changer. And so we were just really dynamic. So it was hard for anybody to account for that much just basketball IQ and ability to just figure the game out. And so it was a really tough team. So they were kind of knocked on their heels by the fact, as was Marquette, by the fact that we were just so dynamic at the guard positions. And so it really gave us a shot.
Were you still on the 1 at that time?
I always been combo, so I bring it up, and we really had a great system where everybody was a combo. So if we got into it, obviously Greg was that ultimate, floor general, but we all had a similar skill set, even though we had a different mindset, which, for me, it was putting that ball in the hole.
There you go.
Antonio, I think it was just put on a show, whatever that meant. If that meant throw it behind my back to a dude for a dunk or hit 10 threes, and then Dante, just the ultimate team player, and Greg, that floor general, man. We were just a potent squad.
You mentioned the fact that you still weren't a starter. Did that matter to you as much?
It did. I mean, I didn't think I should have beat any of those guys out. I hadn't earned it, so that it wasn't a problem like that. But it was just we all aspired to be starters. So
is that just ego?
It's competitiveness. You know what I'm saying? And I tell people that. I don't care whatever your industry is, you should aspire to be the best. Ultimately, we're doing the same job. If I look at anybody, I don't care if you're the secretary and the person that's in there that might be the lawyer or the AD or the superintendent or whatever, you're doing a lot of the same things that person is doing, maybe even more.
True.
Same thing as you're a bench player. You've got a lot of responsibility as that starter. So why not aspire to be that? Not to the standpoint where I'm hating on you, but to the standpoint of I want to learn from you to try to get to that level.
Yeah, I'm gonna push you every day.
Right, absolutely.
You got to beat me out every day.
Absolutely, man.
So what about your junior and senior seasons?
Okay, so that's when it popped off, man.
That's when it popped off?
Yeah, I had been chiseled, and Greg had graduated, so I got the opportunity to move into the starter's role as a junior, and really senior year never came off the floor. I got the opportunity to lead the team in scoring, steals, assists, 3-pointers made for 2 straight seasons. I don't think that had been done since Rod Thompson. Got the opportunity to finish top 10 in all 3 of those categories as well: steals, assists, 3-pointers made, and points. And that was the first time anybody had done that since Shea Seals, finishing in multiple categories in the top 10. And so it was just a whirlwind, man. We got the opportunity to play some really big-time basketball, and I just enjoyed every minute of it.
Now, man, listen, I'm going to ask you a super practical question now. How much of those home-cooked meals did you get to indulge in? The fact that you're sitting right here in the city throughout that whole run.
You already know. You telling me about the home-cooked meal since you've been back.
Right. That's right.
You already know Mom's was coming through,
Got
man. And Pops can cook as well, so, it was never a problem getting fed.
I'm going to tell you, getting fed and you going out there and you feeding out that work. So here's one of the most fascinating chapters average of all these types of conversations that I have with guys that fit the profile, for lack of a better word, as you do, when did it become a thought or even a real possibility that, yo, I might not be done after that senior season? It's like, yo, I could keep on playing.
Yep. For me, man, it was always just something that came with it. I assumed I was going to get the opportunity. It was funny because I kind of just, for me, it was NBA or bust. So in my mind, I'm going to the league some way, somehow.
Right.
Matter of fact, as a junior, I put my name in the draft. By all projections, I would have been a second-round pick. And that kind of scared me because at the time, second round wasn't guaranteed. I didn't necessarily think I was good enough in my own mind, but I thought that I had the requisite numbers and impact that a lot of people that get drafted do. So I'm like, okay, let me put my name out here, got second round, and I'm like, well, if that means I got to go out and prove myself and nothing to fall back on, I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So I came back my senior year, went from averaging 14 points a game to 18 points a game as a senior, but we were just terrible. You know, we went from literally 3 straight years of 20-plus wins to losing 20 games my senior year. And that's why I'm a big proponent of the power of team, man, because all those guys that graduated, and in my mind, I'm like, well, this ship keep rolling, you know, and it definitely did not.
It didn't. Got to sinking a little
That
bit.
is kind of starting to sink. But I think that was a lot of that had to do with the level of recruiting and you know, Bill Self had obviously built the program and had been a head coach for many years, and so our coaching staff then became a lot of less experienced at that level guys, and so I think it was just a confluence of factors. So for me, to answer your question, I go from, well, I'm going to the NBA, NBA guys at my practices, NBA scouts at my games, to, okay, I'm not getting any NBA calls, so what's next? And that's when I started to learn more about overseas. And it was funny, AD, because at that point I knew nothing about overseas. And when I actually got over there, I got the opportunity to get my first contract in Italy, Division II. And I get over there and I'm seeing, you know, guys like Carlos Boozer and Trajan Langdon and Mateen Cleaves and all these guys that, you know, I looked up to for years.
Cats, man.
And then when I found out what them brothers was making, I'm like, okay, like this is a possibility. You know what I'm saying? And so at that point, I'm like, okay, I could get out here and really do my thing. And so just started to move up every year. Went from A2 Italy to A1 Russia, the Super League. Was on one of the bottom A1 teams there, but every single team had 3 or 4 NBA guys.
Including yours?
Yeah, we didn't have any. Okay. So we had some.
Short end of the stick.
Right, we had some Russians that had been drafted, but nobody that was a certified NBA guy.
Gotcha.
But guys making a meal plus, you know, and so it was one of those things where you realize this is a viable career path. So I really started to pour into it, go from there to back to A2 Italy, get a contract in A1 Italy, then end up doing 2 years in Greece. And while I was in Greece, Darius Washington, who had been with the Mavericks and played at University of Memphis, was on my team. J.R. Brimmer, who was with the Celtics, was on my team. And C.J. Watson, who had a long NBA career, was a rookie on that team. And I was just in my zone at that point in my career, and I was the number 1 guard on that team. And so I'm looking NBA player. CJ had just come from Tennessee. He didn't get to play much. And then that next year, CJ goes to the D League and plays with Golden State, Don Nelson at the time, who had, you know, small ball. They were shooting it from all over the court.
And gunning.
Yes. So he ends up getting a 10-day and never looking back. So I'm like, what? I got to be close.
Yeah.
So at that point, I gave up my 2-year deal at Italy and said, man, I'm going to go back and go to the D League. And came back to the D League, man, and that summer, right before training camp, I'm playing with Tim Gill and Ebby Erie and all these guys in a summer pro-am, and ended up tearing my ACL. And so, man, it was terrible timing, but ended up rehabbing and going to the D League anyway. Austin Toros drafted me, and so in 5.5 months, I'm actually starting on an NBA D-League team. And after like 10 games, man, I'm become a starter. I'm shooting like 40% from the three, playing really well. Playing for Quinn Snyder, who's been a longtime coach at the Jazz. And man, I end up going up for a layup in Rio Grande Valley, man, and the same knee just came apart, split in half, man. And so it was a wrap at that point. Yep, it was a wrap. Everybody saw it but me. So, so yeah, man. But it ended up being a real blessing in disguise because it forced me to recognize that was even a possibility and what was that next chapter, you know. And I see a lot of those guys that I played with ended up playing another 10 years. And which was both a gift and a curse, you know, because you're putting off the real world more and more and more, and you're not developing those skills, those relationships, that experience that is so critical. And so it ended up being a great thing for me.
What year was that?
This was 2008, man. My son was born in 2007, signed that 2-year deal in 2007, which was a big deal because most European teams only give you 1-year deals. And so to be it was my first opportunity to actually be on a top tier team in a top league. And it just speaks to the level of which I was playing at that time, man. I was probably, as far as Europe's concerned, you know, definitely a top 50 guard, if not top 30, when you look at the litany of countries and the litany of teams and levels at each country. I was able to get to the tippy top, you know, and so that was at the point where I felt like I was ready to go to the NBA. And so I tell people all the time, man, I don't care what it is, get your mindset first, because had I developed that mindset when I was back in college that, you know, I don't care what the situation, I can make it, I definitely think I would have been able to crack an NBA roster.
When you tore that knee up for the final time, was there, as grueling as it was and as demoralizing as I'm sure it was there ever a thought that I could come back from this?
Always, bro. Always. Right now, if I got that call, I'm like, hold on, boy.
Hold on.
Let me stretch it.
Hey, give me 10 days.
10 days, bro.
To get ready for 10 days.
No, I went to law school, man. As I said, my pops is, you know, attorney.
That's right.
And so one thing he had told me from the moment I left TU to fly across that water was take that LSAT, because you can always fall back on it. And so I did. And so that was the first thing I looked into was law school. TU was gracious enough to allow me to come back as a graduate assistant. And I absolutely hated it, bro. I mean, I'll go from, you know, traveling the world, making hundreds of thousands of dollars to I'm up in a classroom being grilled. I'm, you know, the coffee guy bringing coffee to the coaches and the ADs.
Yeah, man.
And I'm not necessarily a young buck at this point. I mean, I'm 28, 29. Yeah. I was 31 when I graduated. So I'm like, I'm not a kid. You know what I'm saying?
That's more like 22, 23-year-old stuff.
Where you could just tell me run around there and pick something up. Like, I'm like, hey, bro, like, I probably made more money than you, but okay, I'll do it. So it was
Man.
But it's all love, man. They treated me really well. It was just a different dynamic. I hated it so much. I'm calling my agent every day, like, man, can you find me something? And so it had ended up being 2 years, AD, between when I left Europe, went to the D League, tore my knee up early in that season. Tore my knee up that summer, waited till December to come back, tore my knee up again. Then it had been a whole, because I had tried to wait and come back again. So it was the next fall. So you're talking about a 2-year period where I really hadn't played a lot of ball. So it wasn't a whole lot of people calling my name. You know what I'm saying? And which ended up being by the grace of God, because law school ended up really being a blessing. Almost flunked out my first semester. But once I kind of stabilized and realized, like, this is it, you know what I'm saying? Like, God, this is my opportunity. He ain't bringing me nothing else until I knock this out. And so just put 10 toes down, man, and figured it out and, you know, was able to progress through that.
So when you finally progressed through that and checked that box, what was next? Because the Jason Parker that I've gotten to know, I've only known you in the role as an administrator, you know what I mean, an athletic director, right? And sprinkles of coaching here and there, you know what I'm saying? But I'm pretty sure that there's some deleted scenes in there too, man.
Well, man, for me, like I said, at this point, you got to think I had made quite a bit of money, so I had developed a lifestyle. I mean, I had a house, I had cars, I had a wife, I had a kid. When I graduated law school, I had a second kid. So a lot of the opportunities, I originally told myself I want to be a collegiate AD. But a lot of the opportunities that was coming my way were entry level. Be another GA or come in and make, the entry level amount of money. And I'm like, my life's not set up for that right now. So I knew I had to go somewhere where I could stand out, where I could quickly ascend to an executive level position. And so I wasn't looking for interscholastic school, but I did know I wanted to be in administration. And so I'm still looking at colleges, still searching at colleges. And Monte Casino in Tulsa, little K through 8. Actually, it's the largest private school. K through 8 private school in the state, I believe, at least it was at the time. But I had no idea what Monte Casino was, even growing up right here in Tulsa. And they told me,
we used to have to deal with them when I was at Carver. Man, we were creeping them, man.
I never knew, bro. And so they're like, hey, we looked at your LinkedIn profile. We know you want to be an AD. We're looking for an AD. Why don't you come out here and check us out? And I'm like, and Shay Seals actually the one that gave me the call, said, hey, man, Kasha Hall is looking for you. They want you to maybe be their AD. So I'm like, cool. I know Kasha. Maybe I'll call them back. And when I called him, the lady's like, Monte Casino. And I'm like, what is Monte Casino? You know what I'm saying? Then when she said K through 8, I almost hung up the phone. And so she's like, no, just come out here and check it out, man. And when I got out there, man, it was exactly what I needed, because I got the opportunity to really put my hands on the program. It was so closely aligned with the University of Tulsa that it spoke to me, and it really allowed me to leverage a lot of my contacts, man. We ended up having TU soccer coach our kids. We ended up having TU basketball come and train our kids almost every day. We ended up sending all our kids to Vince Westbrook Tennis Academy and so on and so forth. So they, at the time, were experiencing a lot of attrition. A lot of their kids were going to Cascia, Holland Hall, Carver, and what have you, because of sports, because of the lack of a serious sports program. So they really just gave me the ball, gave me a lot of resources, and told me to run with it. And after 2 years, man, that attrition had ended. We were able to capture data through exit surveys, which prior to my tenure, over 50% of parents were saying they were leaving for athletics. At the end of my tenure, not 0% were saying that. And so we were able to make a really big impact, and that's when I knew, I got something here.
Yeah. A couple things come from that. Number one, I want to ask you, what all does the job of an athletic director entail? Because I'm going to tell you, the first two things that come to my brain, and call me an amateur because I've never been in that role, but it's going to be real practical. Number one, you're hiring coaches,
right?
Which means, as a byproduct, if you're hiring, you're firing as well.
That's right.
And number two, you got to raise money.
Yeah.
The athletic department. But I'm pretty sure that ain't all that exists.
For me, man, number one, I think the most impactful thing that I do is establish direction. So you mentioned hire coaches. I have to hire coaches that are aligned with the vision of where we want to go, right? And so I think first and foremost, you got to be able to craft a narrative and tell a story. And you can only get that story through gleaning it from stakeholders. What does this area need? What's the story of this place? What are we lacking? Why aren't we where we should be? At least has been the situation in the roles I've been involved with. And so being able to take that from various stakeholders, parents, alumni, community members, students, and figure out what's the best way to move forward, and then sell that to people, right? Because then all of a sudden the resources come. The coaches, as you mentioned, come. The support comes. And you got something at that point. So I think that's the biggest thing you do. And I think that's done through connection. You've got to have those soft skills to be able to connect with people, whether it be through conversation, whether it be through, giving a speech or listening, And so it's multifaceted, but I think you got to get people on your team to be able to see the vision and then go out and support your programs.
I'll put all that in the category of being likable.
Absolutely.
It sort of helps.
Absolutely. No, you got to be likable, but not just that, because there are times when people are going to hate you, know, and I get a lot of hate, quite honestly, and I think that's a part of it, although, nobody wants that. I tell my secretary all the time, I'm not seeking hate. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes that comes when you got to make difficult decisions. When I tell my kids no, I'm not necessarily their best friend at the time, but sometimes that has to happen. And when you're talking about an atmosphere where there's limited resources, sometimes you have to put your attention in one area for the good of the organization, and it may temporarily hurt another area. And so it is being likable, but it's being, I think, multifaceted, where people can identify with you and your mode of thinking.
This is not necessarily a question, but I'm gonna say this from hearing you talk. It seems like you went sort of an unconventional route.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's just
non-traditional.
Oh yeah, okay, cool. So I'm not crazy, because the way I always see it, usually the ADs that I've come in contact with, they have coached first.
Absolutely.
Which meant that at some point somebody told them, you got to teach.
That's right.
If you want to make any real money.
Yep.
So they have that background, and then they eventually evolve into the role of an athletic director or any administrator, either because they get burnt out on coaching, they retire,
Absolutely.
or it's a money grab.
Yeah. No, I tell people all the time, I was able to go the non-traditional route. Obviously, my career and experience as a player is kind of rare, having had played at the levels I was able to play at, and then the opportunity to earn a law degree was something that was really unique, I think, to my journey. And these are two divergent worlds, so they didn't necessarily line up. People didn't know how to read me, and so really it was hard to get traction. But the Monte Casino opportunity kind of brought it all. Okay, he's got the athletics and he's got the academics, and he's able to use them both effectively and lead people and lead organizations. And so I became, somebody that was sought after at that point, and I think by virtue of those two things.
So Monte Casino was stint number one. Correct me if I'm wrong, but was stint number two Sapulpa?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. So at that point, like I said, with basketball, when you get into it and you don't kind of know what you're getting into, and you realize this is a viable career right here. Monte Casino was like, I just stumbled into it. Let's just figure it out. And all of a sudden, I'm looking around, I'm going to area meetings, I'm connecting with other ADs, and I'm like, this is a viable career. And so I quickly set my sights on the 6A level. I wanted to be, just like I said, if you're doing something, I think you need to at least aim for the highest level.
Yeah.
And so I quickly surrounded myself with those types of people, became an understudy, and just got in rooms and soaked up information, made connections, and by virtue of what was going on at Monte Casino, got that opportunity to move up to Sapulpa.
So, and then you're back with one of your good old friends, man, old Ricky Bruner Jr., man.
Actually, not just yet. We started off with Conley Phipps. So Conley had just been hired, and man, we got in that thing and we got it rocking, man. It was I think my opportunity, and I tell people all the time, often you get an opportunity because there was an issue there. Maybe it's a void that was left by the previous person. Maybe it were mistakes that were made, what have you. Maybe that person did a great job and moved on, and now you got to pick up the pieces. But because of what I was able to do at Monte Casino, it seemed like people who identify with my leadership style kind of wanted me to come and change things. Like, hey, we're needing a big turnaround. And so those have kind of been the jobs that have aligned with me. And Sapulpa was in that mode. They had a really dynamic superintendent at the time, Kevin Burr, who was a Tulsa guy, or a Tulsa Public Schools guy, although he's a Kansas guy. And I think he knew the power of athletics in turning around an organization. I think he also knew the power of minority stakeholders and really getting minority students involved. And so that was something that we really identified as a key factor in our success. And like I said, with Monte Casino, they gave me the resources to go and do that, and we did that. And so we were able to go from, basically what was the laughing stock of 6A to being in state in a lot of sports. Football went to to the quarterfinal or semifinals, and basketball was in the semi or quarters. And a lot of our sports just catapulted by virtue of really, and I tell people all the time, it's not me. It is, number one, the support. You got to get the community. You got to start to get people to know that sports matter. And so as a result, we're willing to give you our time, talent, and energy. And then the coaches. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And so once you get that right coach in the seat, support them enough where they've got the time and the runway to take off, things are it's just a matter of time at that point.
How long were you at Sepulveda before you made the
I was there 4 years.
4 years.
I was there 4 years.
Yeah. How do you know when it's time to make a move?
Man, that's a good question, bro. I really think that first and foremost, you have to do the hard work of being where your feet are.
Yeah.
And so I've always, got that antsiness at some point, but it's just reminded me that I've got more work to do here. And once that work is done, the Creator will see fit to move me forward in due time. But let me do as much as I can. Let me put all 10 toes down here. There's always some more juice to be squeezed out of that lemon. And so I say that to say I think you really don't know. You look and see, is there more to be done here? I did feel at both Monte Casino and Sepulpa like I had done all I could do. Obviously I could stay on that horse and continue to ride it, but I had rode it for as hard as I could ride it and maximized my talent there, and at that point I really feel like it was best for somebody else to take over as well as for me to move on.
Yeah. Constantly challenging yourself.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, you're always looking for bigger and better, for more, for maximum impact, I call it. And
True.
So when people ask me, where you see yourself in 5 years, the answer is making maximum impact, whatever that looks like at the time.
So you're at Muskogee now.
Absolutely.
And we're relatively early into this school year, so this is year
number 4.
Something about that magic number.
Yeah, man. And that's what I told him when I got here, man. I said, according to everything I know, you give me 4 years and you're going to be happy with the result, And
so you found your footing.
Yes, and absolutely, even in the midst of COVID, that was one of our years, And we're still progressing, but we've gotten off to a great start this year. And like I said, it's a confluence of factors, man. There's so much support from the community that I get to take advantage of. There's so much support from our administration that I get to take advantage of. There's so much support from kids and coaches that want to be a part of what we've got going on. And so I'm just a piece in that whole scenario.
One more question before we move into some family stuff and work our way toward the end. So you not only moved schools, but within the conference. How well received was that move, man?
Man, well, I don't. Some folks at Sepulpa were not happy,
right?
But that comes with it. At the end of the day, I think there was once emotions have subsided. I think there's a lot of appreciation on both sides. I hear from a lot of coaches and community members. And they were thankful for my time there, as am I.
Right.
And so it was just one of those things where the timing was right. I tell people all the time, like I was not sold on Muskogee. I've never have to drive to work. I've never, obviously I know Muskogee from being in green country, and they were always the roughers, literally and figuratively.
That's
like
right.
You was gonna get a rough battle when you went there. But I just felt like, I had gotten Sepulpa to where it fit like a glove, and I hadn't been looking. But Dr. Mendenhall, Dr. Deich sold me on the vision. Like I said, I think that's the biggest part. I don't care if you're a coach. I don't care if you're a teacher. I don't care what you do. Like, you've got to sell the people that you lead on the vision.
Sure.
There's got to be something to believe in, a unified goal, so to speak. And so they sold me on their vision for Muskogee, and I have to say that it's come to pass as like they told me it would. And so it's just been a beautiful thing, man. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Your wife and your children, you've made mention of them, at different points throughout this conversation. But you got 3 children, right?
That's right.
You got your son, who's the oldest, and you got 2 daughters, right?
That's right.
And then you got your wife, and y'all go way back.
Yeah, Memorial High School.
So loving that. Okay, so talk about where they fit in your life and in your day to day, because you do a lot, man.
Man, they don't fit. They are the piece that everything else fits around, and so everything I do is for them. You mentioned, when do you know the time is right? A lot of times when these opportunities present themselves, I not only pray for God's favor and his wisdom in moving about the situation, but I also pray for the logistics, because in the Bible it says you gain the world and lose your soul, and I've seen a lot of people that take a step forward in life, so to speak, but then they lose those ones that matter most to them. And so I'm always praying on the logistics. How does this fit? As I mentioned, even building this gym was a result of me not being able to work with my daughter, and having that drive and having to come home and then find a gym. And some nights you find something, and that's our time together. It's just as it is for my son. Like I said, it's a family business.
Yes, right.
So
not to be played with.
That's right. So as a result, man, that's something I'm always on the lookout for, is how does this fit for my family? And my wife of, dang, they're 20 years now, man. So 2004.
How'd that sound coming at you,
man? I almost had to stutter, man. I'm like, God, how long has it been? But she's everything, from the overseas days when I signed my first contract. We got married 2 weeks before, and she's been with me ever since. She was with me before that throughout high school and college. And she just makes everything right. Whatever is on the peripheral, she's going to figure it out and knock it down where it's not an issue for us. And so it's just a beautiful thing, man. It's a blessing to have that consistency piece, which is the family.
Talk about your hobbies, man. How do you decompress after a long day or a day where you have nothing to do work-wise? What do you do with yourself, man?
Man, I am not a big hobby guy. Okay. Basketball was always my love, right, and I devoted myself to that. And so it's just really as I've started to get older that I've understood the value of hobbies, and so I'm so whack when it comes to the hobby game, dog. Like I ride a bike. I try getting on road biking with some of my boys, and I'm just getting smashed. Like I'm getting left by right. But they don't want to see me on that court though, because that's all I ever did, bro.
My domain.
So I'm learning the value of hobbies, man. Really, I am big into making money. I think the importance of moving us as people to another level where we have opportunities. As we mentioned, a lot of us don't have the opportunities to go and even just see. Sometimes it's a very big deal. And so I am huge into, I think one of the ways you do that is financially. Yep. And you got to have the means, and I've been able to see that having the means opens doors. And so usually when I'm away from, the work spot, I am trying to create wealth, for my family, for my loved ones, for those that I'm called to serve. And so we namely do that through real estate. My wife and I have a emerging real estate business that we've been operating for 6 years now. But really, whatever's clever, if it's a way that we can get down through there, and start to make some headway, we're all about it. So a lot of my time when I'm not at work, I'm reading, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm connecting, even doing some teaching, and mentoring, because like I said, we have been able to make some headway, and so that's that's my hobby, man.
Last 2 questions. Are you done with getting educated? Are you done with school, or you going back? You gonna be Dr.
Oh man, no. I've looked into the doctorate. I actually got a third of the doctorate done. And the only reason I did that, AD, was because my whole resume didn't say anything education-wise. And so when I mentioned that time of learning when I was at Monte Casino, one of the things I wanted to do was go back and get my doctorate, and I ended up getting my administrator's license and executive leadership, which was the superintendent certification. So I got that, which was a third of a doctorate. And then I got my master's in athletic administration. And I tell young coaches and aspiring administrator all the time, man, that education, I know it seems like you're stepping backwards because everybody else is getting experience. But like it was in my situation, when the experience meets the education, you're able to really stand out. And so I advise everybody, man, get as much education as you can because it will pay off for you. But as it relates to me, I'm done. I'm done with the education.
You heard it here, man.
I told you podcasts, and I do a lot with, like I said, real estate. So I'm always gaining real estate certifications. For sure. But no, I'm not, I'm done with the education.
Yeah, I love it. No more school with Jason Parker.
You heard it here.
Yes, sir. Last question. This is the all due disrespect segment, man. So I want you to go back in the archives, right? At any level that you played at, a team that beat you that had absolutely no business beating you still remember to this day. And if you could go back and run it back, you're going right to it.
Oh, man, that's easy, bro. My homeboy, I got to give a shout out to Jesse McNeil, man, my ace. We grew up together. He played at Jinx. And, you know, every time I ever played this brother, he beat me. Every time. And so we were literally, they came in the Jinx. In the Memorial during the quarterfinal, during the regional final, rather. And like I said, we had a juggernaut of a team. And I can still remember the article coming out, previewing the game, you know, had my picture on it. And it's just like I'm getting ready to get some payback for all them years, you know, when I transferred.
Yeah, you gonna feel me.
And, man, we were actually up 1 with like 3 seconds left. And they're taking it out on their end. So it's like, this game is over. And I tell one of my teammates, I said, don't let him get behind you because he's a wide receiver is what he does by trade. But he plays some basketball too.
Right.
And so I look up, man, next thing I know, he's catching the ball at the rim, going up for a layup, you know, ends up getting fouled, making 2 free throws that we lose at home. So I'm like, I want to run that back right now.
Right now. Man, that's always my favorite question because, listen, we do so much good stuff.
Yeah.
You would think that you would, you know, that memory would get buried up underneath all your success.
Never.
But it stays in the front.
Yes, sir.
Well, listen, man, I want to thank you again for the hospitality.
No, this has been awesome, man.
Yeah, man, I've been wanting to have this conversation for a minute
For
since
sure,
you had me
man.
on yours about 4 or 5 years ago. So
Much
much success, continued success.
I appreciate you, bro.
And I'm gonna be watching.
Yes, sir. Same to you, brother.
Yes, sir. We always got to get a right-handed fellowship so he can go ahead and get us on camera. We look like politicians.